Now then, let us begin here with something extraordinarily simple and yet endlessly misunderstood. Most of us are living as if life were a wild horse that must be broken, bridled, and ridden in the direction we have chosen. We grip the reins tightly, we lean forward with effort, we strain, and all the while we say to ourselves, if only I can keep things under control, then I will be safe. Then I will be happy. Then I will finally live. But have you noticed, really noticed, that the harder you pull, the more skittish the horse becomes? The more you try to dominate life, the more it throws you, and you land flat on your back wondering what went wrong. You see, the curious thing is this: trying to control life is precisely how you lose it. Now, I don't mean that you shouldn't plan your day or look both ways before crossing the street. That would be quite silly. What I'm talking about is something much deeper, something psychological, existential, and profoundly human. I'm speaking of the inner tension that says, I must make this moment different from what it is in order to be at peace. And that, my friends, is where the trouble begins. Let us imagine for a moment that life is like a river, not a polite little stream flowing gently between tidy banks, but a vast, powerful river, sometimes calm, sometimes roaring, sometimes meandering, sometimes plunging into rapids. Now, you may step into this river and attempt to dam it, to force it into channels of your own design. You may shout at it, curse it, and demand that it flow more smoothly. But the river will smile, if rivers can smile, and continue on its way. And so will life. The great illusion is that there is a separate controller standing outside the flow, pulling levers, pushing buttons, and directing the course of events. We imagine there is a little me inside the skull, sitting behind the eyes, giving orders to reality. I must make myself successful. I must prevent pain. I must secure my future. But where, exactly, is this controller? If you look for it, not intellectually but experientially, you find thoughts arising, feelings appearing, sensations dancing in the body. You find impulses, memories, fears, hopes, but no central commander. Just as there is no single wave in the ocean that controls the tide. And yet, we cling desperately to the idea of control because it gives us a sense of security, or rather, the illusion of security. Consider how we approach happiness. We say, I will be happy when I have enough money, when I find the right relationship, when I fix myself, when the world finally behaves. Happiness is always postponed, always dependent upon conditions being arranged just so. But life is not an arrangement. It is a happening. Trying to control life is like trying to flatten water with a hammer. Every strike creates more ripples. Every attempt to pin it down makes it slip through your fingers. And the more anxious you become about controlling the future, the more you miss the only place where life is actually occurring, now. Now is not a stepping stone to something else. It is not a means to an end. It is the whole show. And this brings us to the peculiar anxiety that haunts modern people, the fear of uncertainty. We want guarantees, we want assurances, we want life to sign a contract promising that nothing will go terribly wrong. But life does not sign contracts. Life is improvisation, jazz, not a marching band. And the irony, oh, the delicious irony, is that the moment you stop trying to control the dance, you suddenly find yourself moving with it. When you loosen your grip, you gain balance. When you stop resisting the current, you discover that it has been carrying you all along. This is not resignation. This is not passivity. This is not giving up. It is something far more subtle and far more alive. It is participation. You see, control assumes separation. It assumes that you are here and life is over there, and that the task is to force life to conform to your ideas. But participation recognizes that you are not outside the process. You are it. Just as your heart beats without your supervision, just as your lungs breathe without consulting your plans, so too does life live itself through you. You did not invent your desires. You did not design your personality. You did not choose the time, place, or circumstances of your birth. And yet here you are, breathing, sensing, aware. So who exactly is doing the controlling? When we begin to see this, something remarkable happens. The strain eases. The clenched fist opens. The constant inner commentary, am I doing this right? What if I fail? What if I lose? Begins to soften. And in that softening, there is a sense of trust. Not trust in a plan, not trust in an outcome, but trust in the process itself. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be lived. When you stop trying to control the mystery, you don't fall into chaos. You fall into rhythm. You begin to respond instead of react. You listen instead of impose. You move with circumstances rather than against them. And paradoxically, this is always the way. The more you let go of control, the more skillfully you act. Just as the best dancer is not the one thinking about each step, but the one who has forgotten themselves in the movement. The ego, that anxious little bundle of self-concern, believes it must hold everything together. It believes that if it loosens its grip for even a moment, everything will collapse. But the ego is like a man clenching his teeth to keep the sun from setting. It is working very hard at something that does not require its effort. And so the invitation is not to abandon responsibility, but to abandon the fantasy of absolute control. To see that life is not something you manage from above, but something you express from within. And when you begin to live this way, when you allow life to happen rather than constantly interfering with it, you may find, quite unexpectedly, that you have not lost control at all. You have lost the need for it. And that is where freedom begins. And you see, once that need for control loosens, you begin to notice something rather astonishing. Life has an intelligence of its own, not an intelligence that can be written into neat formulas or reduced to moral instructions, but a living, breathing intelligence, much like the way your body knows how to heal a wound without consulting your opinions about it. If you cut your finger, you don't sit down with a clipboard and issue commands to the skin. You don't say, now listen here, cells, organize yourselves immediately. You simply keep the wound clean, perhaps put on a bandage, and the body does the rest. Healing happens by itself, not because you controlled it, but because you trusted the process enough not to interfere. Yet psychologically, we do the exact opposite. We interfere constantly. We poke and prod our emotions. We tell ourselves which feelings are acceptable and which must be suppressed. We demand clarity where none exists. We insist on certainty in a universe that is, by its very nature, fluid. And then we wonder why we feel exhausted, anxious, and oddly disconnected from life itself. You see, control is always rooted in fear. Strip it down, and you'll find fear at the center. Fear of pain, fear of loss, fear of death, fear of not being enough. We try to control life because we are afraid of what might happen if we don't. But here is the great cosmic joke. Everything you are trying to avoid by controlling life is already built into the game. Pain is unavoidable. Loss is inevitable. Change is constant. And death, well, death is the rule, not the exception. Trying to control life in order to escape these realities is like trying to keep waves from breaking by commanding the ocean to behave itself. It is not only futile, it is absurd. And once you see the absurdity, you may begin to laugh. Not a cynical laugh, but a deep, liberating one. Because when you stop fighting the fact that life includes uncertainty, you free an enormous amount of energy. Energy that was previously spent bracing, resisting, defending, and worrying. That energy becomes available for living. Now, let us look closely at this idea of letting go, because it is often terribly misunderstood. People imagine that letting go means becoming indifferent, detached, or careless, as if one should simply shrug and say, "Oh well, nothing matters." That is not letting go. That is emotional numbness, disguised as wisdom. True letting go is intensely alive. It is like the difference between a tightrope walker who stiffens in terror and one who relaxes into balance. The relaxed walker is not careless. They are exquisitely sensitive. They feel every subtle shift. Their attention is fully present, and precisely because they are not rigid, they remain upright. Control stiffens you. Letting go sensitizes you. When you stop insisting that life conform to your expectations, you begin to see what is actually happening instead of what you think should be happening. And that is when genuine intelligence comes into play, not the intelligence of rules and strategies, but the intelligence of responsiveness. This is why people who are obsessed with controlling their lives often feel strangely unreal, as if they are watching themselves from a distance. They are so busy managing the performance that they forget to inhabit the experience. They are always one step removed from the moment. Now, consider time. We try to control time relentlessly. We slice it into schedules, deadlines, goals, 5-year plans. We are forever racing ahead, trying to secure a future that has not yet arrived. Or we are replaying the past, attempting to rewrite what cannot be changed. But where is life actually lived? Not in the past, not in the future, but in this fleeting, ever-renewing present. This now that disappears the moment you try to grasp. Trying to control life through time is like trying to hold on to smoke. The tighter your grip, the faster it slips away. And so we become haunted by a sense of urgency, of never having enough time, of always being late for our own lives. Yet the present moment does not require control, it requires attention. When you give attention to what is happening now, without immediately labeling it, judging it, or planning how to manipulate it, you begin to experience a curious sense of spaciousness. Time loosens its grip. Anxiety softens. You realize that this moment, just as it is already complete. And here is something even more radical. You cannot actually control your thoughts. Watch them for a moment. Sit quietly and observe what arises in the mind. You'll notice thoughts appearing spontaneously, like bubbles rising in a glass of water. You did not summon them deliberately. They simply happened. And yet, we identify with them as if they were commands from a central authority. We say, "I shouldn't think this. I must stop feeling that," as if the mind were a misbehaving child that needs constant supervision. But the mind is more like the weather. Thoughts come and go. Emotions pass through. You don't control them any more than you control clouds drifting across the sky. What you can control, if that is the right word at all, is how tightly you cling to them. And clinging is precisely what creates suffering. When you stop trying to control your inner experience, something miraculous happens. It begins to settle on its own, just as muddy water clears when left undisturbed. If you keep stirring it, it stays cloudy. The ego, however, is addicted to stirring. It believes that constant effort equals virtue, that struggle is proof of worthiness, that if it relaxes, it will disappear. And in a sense, it is right. Because when control loosens completely, the ego does dissolve, not into nothingness, but into something far larger. You stop experiencing yourself as a lonely little fragment struggling against the universe and begin to experience yourself as an expression of it. Not a puppet, not a victim, but a movement. You are not a thing in the world. You are an event, a happening, a verb, not a noun. And events cannot be controlled in the way objects can. They can only be danced with. So when life surprises you, and it will, when plans unravel, when certainty dissolves, when the ground shifts beneath your feet, you have a choice. You can tighten your grip and panic, or you can soften, feel the movement, and adjust. The former leads to exhaustion and bitterness. The latter leads to wisdom. And slowly, quietly, without any dramatic fireworks, you begin to understand something that cannot be forced or taught. Life does not need your control. It needs your participation. It needs your presence. It needs your willingness to trust that the same intelligence that turns acorns into oak trees is also at work in you. And when you see that, really see it, you may find that you are no longer trying to hold life together. You are letting it unfold, and it is astonishingly beautiful when you do. And so, as this understanding deepens, not as an idea but as a feeling, as a shift in the way you inhabit your own skin, you begin to notice how extraordinarily tiring control really is. It is exhausting to live as if everything depends on you, as if the universe were a precarious stack of plates that will crash the moment you stop spinning them. This exhaustion is not physical, it is existential. It is the fatigue of pretending to be something you are not, the manager of reality. You see, most of our anxiety comes not from what is happening, but from our resistance to what is happening. Pain, when it arises, is sharp but usually brief. Suffering, however, is pain multiplied by the demand that it must not be so. And that demand, that silent, insistent no we say to life, is an act of control. We say, this shouldn't be happening, but it is. And reality, you will find, is astonishingly unmoved by your objections. Now, let us speak plainly about fear. Not the practical fear that helps you avoid walking into traffic, but the deep, pervasive fear that hums beneath modern life. The fear of losing control. The fear that if you stop managing everything, you will fall apart. That you will be overwhelmed. That you will be exposed as inadequate. This fear is rooted in a misunderstanding of who you are. We imagine ourselves as fragile egos navigating a hostile world, small, separate, and fundamentally alone. And from that assumption, control seems not only reasonable, but necessary. If you are truly on your own in a chaotic universe, of course you must defend yourself at all costs. But what if that assumption is false? What if the sense of being a separate controller is itself a product of the same misunderstanding that creates fear? What if the universe is not something happening to you, but something happening as you? This is not poetry for its own sake. It is a description of experience if you look closely enough. Your body is not separate from nature. It is nature. Your breath is not something you do to the air. It is something you do with the air. Where does breathing stop and the atmosphere begin? Where does your bloodstream end and the food you eat begin? The boundaries are conceptual, not actual. And if this is true physically, why should it not also be true psychologically and existentially? Why assume that your life is something you must wrestle into shape rather than something you are already participating in? Control creates the illusion of safety, but it also creates isolation. It cuts you off from the flow of life by convincing you that you must stand outside it. Letting go, on the other hand, reconnects you. It restores intimacy with existence. This is why moments of genuine joy often occur when control is absent. When you are absorbed in music, in love, in laughter, in creative work, or even in grief, deep, honest grief, you are not managing yourself. You are not standing apart, evaluating, correcting, directing. You are simply there, fully. And in those moments you feel most alive. Notice that joy cannot be forced. You cannot command yourself to be joyful any more than you can command a flower to bloom on schedule. You can create conditions, yes, but the blooming happens when it happens. Life is like that. Now, many people hear this and worry, if I stop trying to control life, won't everything fall into chaos? This fear assumes that chaos is something separate from order, something to be avoided at all costs. But chaos and order are not enemies. They are partners in the dance of existence. A rigid system shatters under pressure. A flexible one adapts. The oak tree that refuses to bend in the wind eventually snaps. The reed that sways survives. And yet the reed is not weak. It is intelligent. It knows how to move. Control is rigidity. Letting go is flexibility. This does not mean you abandon intention or skill. On the contrary, intention becomes clearer when it is no longer distorted by fear. Action becomes more effective when it arises from awareness rather than compulsion. Consider how children play. They are utterly serious in their play, yet completely relaxed. They are absorbed without being anxious, focused without being tense. They do not try to control the outcome. They explore the process. And this, strangely enough, is how the most accomplished artists, athletes, and thinkers operate. They do not dominate their craft. They collaborate with it. They listen. They respond. They allow something to move through them. The moment they try to force it, the magic disappears. Life is no different. When you attempt to control life, you are trying to make a living thing behave like a machine. But life is not mechanical. It is organic. It grows, evolves, surprises, and sometimes dismantles itself in order to begin anew. And this brings us to one of the deepest fears of all, the fear of losing oneself. We cling to control because we are afraid that without it, we will disappear. That the story we tell about who we are, the roles, the achievements, the identities, will dissolve. And they will. But what dissolves is not you. It is the mask. When control loosens, what remains is not emptiness, but presence. Not annihilation, but intimacy. You begin to experience yourself not as a fixed thing, but as a flowing process, like a flame, like a melody, like a wave. A wave does not worry about where it is going. It rises, curls, crashes, and dissolves back into the ocean. Was it ever separate from the ocean? Only in name. And so, when you stop trying to control life, you do not lose yourself. You lose the burden of pretending to be something you were never meant to be. You lose the tension of constant self-surveillance. You lose the exhausting habit of arguing with reality. And in that loss, you gain something immeasurable: ease. Ease does not mean everything becomes pleasant. It means you stop fighting the fact that life includes pain as well as pleasure. You stop demanding that existence conform to your preferences. You meet each moment as it arrives, not as you wish it to be. And from that meeting, wisdom grows naturally, not as a collection of beliefs, but as a way of being. So when uncertainty arises, and it will, notice the impulse to tighten, to grasp, to control. See it, feel it, and instead of obeying it, allow it to be there without acting on it. This simple act, this willingness to feel without immediately fixing, is revolutionary. Because in that moment, you are no longer running from life. You are listening to it. And life, when listened to, has a great deal to say. And when you truly listen, without trying to correct, improve, or manage what you hear, you may discover that life has been speaking all along. It speaks not in sentences, but in sensations. It speaks through the rise and fall of breath, through